Dan Graziano of ESPN New York with Armen and Levack on 104.5 The Team. He's on the Bristol ESPN campus today. Kind enough to step aside and spend a few minutes with us. Dan, you were on NFL Insiders earlier this afternoon as well. So thanks for spending the time. And, of course, in New York Giants land, Will Beatty goes down with the left pec muscle. I mean, this was killer. We've been saying all week, Dan, that this was the worst position on the offensive line that they could have an injury. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, because it was the only one where they knew what they had. I mean, he's the most experienced guy. Beatty takes a lot of criticism, and some of it's deserved and some of it isn't, but he started 46 games in a row, and when you looked at the Giants' offensive line, you know, they didn't really know who was going to play which guard spot. They didn't really know who was going to play right tackle. They think Weston Richburg can handle the switch to center, but Beatty was the one spot that was kind of locked down with a name in it. And now, I mean, there's really no good candidate for it on the roster, so they're going to have to juggle at a place where they really felt like they had their questions already answered.
Dan, we had Jeff Schwartz on the show yesterday, and he seemed pretty confident that Eric Flowers could make the jump from rookie to left tackle.
Well, that's good if you can. I mean, you know, I'm just not a scout, and I don't know how much of Eric's Miami tape he's watched, but the impression I got from people before the draft, and really from the Giants after the draft, was that they didn't see Flowers as an immediate NFL left tackle. They see him as a left tackle project. That the kind of talent and strength and athleticism he needs to play the position, but needs some refinement of his technique. Now, do they speed up that process? Do they try and really throw him in there and give him a whole lot this training camp and see if he can handle it right away? That's probably, you know, something they'll try, but you never know with a young player. He's a very young player. He just turned 21 a couple of weeks ago. You never know with a young player how quickly they're going to come. And they may need him or want him to develop quickly, but it may be that he's not able to. And the Giants are not going to force a rookie into a situation for which they don't believe he's ready. So the next few months will be spent trying to find out how ready he is and how ready some of their other options are for that. But again, if he's not ready, I don't think they're going to put him in there and put his future at risk.
Dan Graziano with Armen and Levack. Dan, what are the odds that they go outside of the organization and sign a free agent or two to compete this summer and into fall?
Well, there isn't much left out there for them to pursue. I mean, a free agency at this point is not chock full of great answers, and you know there really weren't too many great left tackle free agent options on the market. Period. Even back at the beginning. So, you know, Jake Long is out there as a former number one pick that has some experience in the league, but he's been so banged up. And, you know, quite frankly, if you're still a free agent at this point, you know, there's a real good reason for it. You know, it's not as though there aren't other teams out there that are looking for left tackles and they've all passed on these guys that are still out there too. So it may be that they bring in someone to have another body there or someone who might be able to help them as a fill-in starter, but even if they do, they're going to have to look seriously at their in-house options, just as seriously at their in-house options as they would with anybody they'd bring in from the outside.
Dan, they're saying 5 to 6 months with Will Beatty. That's November, December. Do we really think that he'd be available to play towards the end of the year with a left pec muscle?
Well, I mean, yeah, you know, I'm not a doctor and can't talk to the specifics of the injury. I will say this, though. Early in his career, Beatty was a guy that if he had an injury, it would take forever for him to come back. But he kind of has shed that reputation. I mean, last year he broke his leg in the final game of the 2013 season, and he still made it back for the start of 2014. Played every game, so he's not that kind of guy. So I think he's shown over the past year or two an ability to sort of dedicate himself to the work he needs to do to get back, and I'm sure he'll do everything that he can. In terms of the injury itself and how strong we can expect him to be in November, December, that's for people with medical backgrounds to discuss. I don't know, but they're hopeful that he will play for them this year. They did the surgery right away, and they think 5 to 6 months is a reasonable recovery time. Hey, can I ask you guys, you had Schwartz on yesterday. Did you ask him if he ever played left tackle? Because I'm trying to figure out if that's something that's an option for them.
He said no. We asked him that, and he said that he actually had a coach in Carolina who said Jeff Schwartz will never play left tackle. Right tackle is an option, but not left.
So that answers that. We could probably cross him off the list.
Because Jeff Schwartz played right tackle last year, so obviously that is an option for them to put him out there. But then he's a guy that's so good at right guard, and he's not a right guard.
Right. And he was signed to play guard, and that's where they'd really like him. But, you know, best laid plans and all of that. I mean, maybe they're better off with left tackle is the problem. I mean, if Flowers can play left tackle and you're dead set on moving Justin Pugh inside, then maybe it makes more sense to have Schwartz on the outside. But, the plan was Beatty at left tackle, Flowers at right tackle, Pugh and Schwartz at the guard, and Richburg at center. And now, obviously, they have to find a fifth piece no matter what.
Dan, this was the year, like the second year in McAdoo's offense, and we'll get to see really what Eli can do. And this really kind of throws a big monkey wrench in that whole plan, huh?
Yeah, because, again, for all his flaws, Beatty's a starting left tackle in the NFL, and Eli's protection really wasn't a major issue last year. They had a hard time blocking the run game, but they stood up Eli pretty well for most of the season. So it's going to, the fact that it happened in May gives them, June, July, August to figure it all out. And I think that's, if there's a silver lining here, they can make the plan a little differently than they would have, and really sort of, like we talked about at the beginning, if they need to push Flowers a little harder, they have time to do it. So, but yeah, it's going to be a problem. It's not a oh, they'll be fine situation. They're going to have to work extra hard to solve this problem that they didn't foresee. Yes.
ESPN New York, Stan Graziano. What about the running back position? Obviously, the running game, a big issue for the Giants last year. They added Shane Vereen in there along with Jennings and Williams. Now with the left tackle going down, obviously that doesn't help. How confident are the Giants that the running game can be improved this year?
Well, I think they think Richburg is going to be a stronger, more physical presence at center than J.D. Walton was. They liked Walton okay because, in implementing a new offense, Walton had a real head for it and a quick understanding of it and ability to communicate it to everyone else. But Richburg's had a year in the system now, and he'll be fine with those responsibilities, and he's a more physical blocker than Walton was. So they think that'll help them inside. And, they feel like they'll be better at guard if they can get Schwartz healthy, and if they can get Pugh in there, that will be much better than what they had at guard last year. So, you look at the interior of the line and where the run game makes its money. That's something they feel is going to be better this year. But, Beatty is a good run blocker, and they'll miss him. And they think Flowers plays right tackle. Run game is a strength of his, so they feel like they'll get the play blocked better. And in terms of the backs, they brought in Jennings and kind of made him the all-around back. He was going to be first, second, third downs. He can catch the ball a little bit. He can pass protect, but he got hurt, as he very often does. And then, so now they bring in Shane Vereen, who looks like he's slated for the third down work. Very good pass protector, very good pass receiver, as we've seen in New England. And so maybe Jennings goes back to first and second downs, and maybe that doesn't expose him to potential injury as much. And, of course, Andre Williams in his second year could make a leap, too, and certainly force his way into that mix. So they feel good about that crew, and they think that they'll do better blocking in the run game this year. But, again, that's all before this week's news on Beatty.
Dan, Odell Beckham Jr. Said to the Huffington Post he didn't think players were making enough money. Is this a situation where the Giants are going to send him that little email that says, hey, why don't you zip it?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's an email or a coach sits him down and says, hey, maybe that wasn't the smartest thing to say, and here's why. It's a fine line they walk between, you don't want to muzzle a guy, you don't want a guy to not say what he thinks, you don't want a guy to feel like he can't be himself, but you want to educate him as best as possible about the way things you do and say are heard and perceived by the outside world. And that's something that, especially with young players, it can be important to mention. Guys, I coach Little League, and I'm coaching 9-year-olds, and sometimes it amazes me the stuff you have to tell them that they don't know intuitively. But, hey, man, good job catching the ball, but if your foot's not on the base, they're going to call that runner safe. Oh, okay. That stuff you would think they would automatically know. So, young players are like that, even at the age of 22, 23, whatever Odell Beckham is right now. And he has said in the past he's receptive and thankful to the coaching staff for taking him aside and tutoring him on those kinds of things. Hey, I know you don't think you did anything wrong, but here's how what you did or here's how what you said gets heard by people outside. And now, next time, think about that first, and then make your own decisions. But make your own decisions in light of this information that we're giving you that we hope is helpful. That's the way they're operating with Beckham and all their young players. But with Beckham is obviously especially important because the spotlight is the brightest on him.
Absolutely. A lot of temptations out there. Dan Graziano of ESPN, at Dan Graziano ESPN on Twitter. He's in Bristol right now. You were on NFL Insiders earlier this afternoon, all over SportsCenter as well. And Dan, as we look at Ray Rice, the domestic violence charges were dropped yesterday. What are the chances Ray Rice gets back in the NFL and gets a job?
I don't think they're very good because I don't think it was the domestic violence charges that were holding him up. I mean, Greg Hardy got a job, and his thing is still obviously not resolved. I mean, I think what's costing Ray Rice a chance is that he's 28, which doesn't sound old to me at all, but for a running back it is. And the last time he played was 2013, and he was horrible. He had a 3.1 yards per carry average in 2013. I believe it's the fifth worst ever in NFL history for a running back that got at least 200 carries. So what we're looking at is a guy who didn't play last year. The last time he did play, he wasn't any good. And in the meantime, he's sort of become the face of the NFL's ugliest issue in terms of domestic violence and player discipline. So he doesn't offer enough in the upside talent department in the eyes of teams to make it worth taking on the external stuff, explaining to your fan base why you signed him, dealing with protests and criticism, that kind of stuff. So somebody has an injury at running back, has a need, do they bring him into camp and give him a shot and see what he looks like? Maybe, but maybe not. And that's sort of where Ray Rice is in his career now.
Dan, I almost feel bad asking this one, but when I've got a guy who is as well-versed in the NFL as you on the phone, I have to. How long does Deflategate linger? What's next?
Deflategate has all the air not gone out of that one yet.
Well played.
They got to get a hearing date set for Brady's appeal. It's the kind of thing. It's a Friday before Memorial Day weekend. You figure the NFL is going to put some news they don't like out there at like 4 or 5 o'clock. But they haven't set a date for Brady's appeal. It seems like Goodell's going to be the hearing officer. The union's going to kick and scream about that. If they don't get what they want, this union has shown in the past and even this week that it's willing to pursue legal action in the courts against the league if it feels like its players' rights have been violated. This thing isn't ending anytime soon. When the thing came out, the punishment came out, my first reaction was that Brady's suspension would be reduced on appeal. But now you're hearing, well, he doesn't want it reduced. He wants it eradicated. And if they won't do that, then he'll fight him in court. So this could, unfortunately, this could take a while.
I'm sure you love it. It's so much fun, right?
Well, I mean, it gives us something to talk about in the offseason. But, man, sometimes the NFL offseason really stinks. I mean, these stories are not, you talk about domestic violence and suspensions and rules violations and all that stuff, and sometimes you think to yourself, man, it would be nice if somebody just play a game. We talk about that instead.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan Graziano of ESPN on the Bristol campus today. Dan, thank you so much for your time. And he is one of the best at answering your questions from the NFL fans. Hit him up on Twitter, at Dan Graziano, ESPN. Just an amazing job of communicating with everybody in the mailbags and everything that you do. So, Dan, thank you so much, man, and have a great Memorial Day weekend.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.